All right, section 4.2, connective tissue connects and supports. So after this section, you should be able to describe the primary types of connective tissue and provide the functions of each, compare the structure and function of bone and cartilage, and differentiate between blood and lymph. So, connective tissues. Connective tissues provide the body and its organs with protection and support, but it's also going to serve as a storage site for fat and plays a very important role in immunity. Now, there are a lot of different forms and functions as it is the most widely distributed tissue in the body. The cells that are contained in an extracellular matrix of protein fibers and a ground substance. So, like I said, connective tissues contain ground substances, fibers, and cells. A ground substance could be solid, like bone, or fluid, like blood, or gelatinous, like cartilage. Cells can also be very loosely distributed in a matrix, so amongst fibers and ground substance. So it kind of would look like fruit in a Jell-O salad. There are three types of protein fibers. There are collagen fibers, which are going to be really flexible and strong, reticular fibers, which are thin and highly branched collagen fibers, and then elastic fibers. Elastic fibers are going to contain elastin, which is a protein that stretches and recoils. There are three main types of connective tissues. There's fibrous, supportive, and fluid. So we'll go through sort of each one of those. Fibrous connective tissues, they come in two main forms. There's going to be loose and dense, both of which are going to contain fibroblasts separated by a matrix, so that ground substance and fibers. The loose fibrous connective tissue would include things like areolar connective tissue, reticular connective tissue, adipose tissue, things like that. The dense fibrous connective tissue is going to be found in things like your tendons. It's going to connect muscles to bones, or your ligaments, which connect bones to bones. Loose fibrous connective tissue supports epithelium and many internal organisms. Many internal organs. So things like adipose tissue, which is used for storing fat. It has very little extracellular matrix. Adipocytes are cells that are filled with liquid fat, and their primary function is going to be energy storage, insulation, and cushioning. This is going to be found mostly under the skin and around some of your organs. Dense fibrous connective tissues contain densely packed collagen fibers. The next group will be our supportive connective tissues. There are two main types, cartilage and bone. Both of them are going to function in structure, or they're going to vary in structure, shape, and protection and leverage for movement. Cartilage is made up of primarily chondrocytes. These are cells that lie in the small spaces called lacunae. The matrix is going to be solid, but relatively flexible. It's going to lack direct blood supply, so cartilage heals very slowly. So if you've ever heard of anybody with torn or damaged cartilage, it's going to be a very slow healing process because there's no direct bloodline to it. There are three types of cartilage, and you can distinguish those by the type of fibers that are found in their matrix. So you may have heard of hyaline cartilage. This is going to be really fine collagen fibers. It's going to be found sort of like in the tip of your nose and the ends of long bones or the fetal skeleton. There's also elastic cartilage. This is going to hold a lot of elastic fibers, sort of found in the outer ear. So if you've ever noticed that your outer ear is very flexible, that's because it's made out of that elastic cartilage. Then there's fibrocartilage. Fibrocartilage is made out of strong collagen fibers, and it's going to be found between the discs in your vertebrae. So that's sort of our cartilage. Next up, we have our bone. Our bone is going to be the most rigid connective tissue. The matrix is made up of collagen and calcium salts, and there are two types of bone tissue, compact and spongy bone. Compact bone is going to make up the shafts of the long bones. It's going to consist of cylindrical structure units called osteons with a central canal that contains blood vessels and nerves. This is why bone starts to heal so very quickly after damage, is because of its abundant blood supply. Bone cells are going to be located in the lacuna. Spongy bone is inside the ends of the long bones. It's lighter than compact bone, but it's still incredibly strong. There are two types of, so those are going to be our bone. The last thing we're going to talk about is fluid connective tissues. There are two types of fluid connective tissues, blood and lymph. Blood is going to be made of a fluid matrix called plasma and cellular components that are called the formed elements. There are three specific formed elements. Red blood cells, also known as erythrocytes. These cells carry oxygen. White blood cells, the leukocytes, those are white blood cells that fight infection. And platelets, or also known as thrombocytes. These are going to be pieces of cells that help the blood to clot. The last fluid connective tissue is lymph. Lymph is derived from the fluid of surrounding tissue, so that interstitial fluid. Lymph is going to contain white blood cells, and the lymphatic vessels are going to be responsible for absorbing excess interstitial fluid and returning the lymph to the cardiovascular system. So here is just sort of a diagram that I do want you to spend just a little bit of time with, just to become familiar with what the different types of tissue look like. So here is our loose fibrous tissue, hyaline cartilage, compact bone, adipose tissue, dense fibrous tissue. So this is just some of those different types of tissues that we talked about and their location in the knee. So this is just a great diagram to kind of walk through the different types of tissue that are going to be found in this region. All right, you should be able to describe the three general categories of connective tissue, provide a few examples of each, and explain the difference in the composition of the matrix in each of the three classes of connective tissue. And I would also like you to review how each of those two fluid connective tissues are important to homeostasis. So blood and lymph. Spend a little bit of time reviewing those from this section.